Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to welcome all of you here today to discuss Trans-Pacific Partnership issues, so to speak, TPP, I believe. And I would like to introduce Professor Urata and also Mr. Schott. Two of them are going to discuss one of the most interesting issues today. And I think Professor Urata is going to talk for 20 minutes or so. And then Mr. Schott will follow. And then we'll have an open discussion. So you have a chance to ask good questions. Let's start. Professor Urata.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Professor Abe, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here in Washington, where policies are made. And what I'd like to talk about is TPP, but my presentation is from the Japanese point of view, and I'd like to hear Jeff's discussion on U.S. views. I guess you don't have copies of my slide, so if you're interested, you can send me email, and I can send you my file. Just to review what TPP is all about, I'd like to begin by giving you basic information on TPP. TPP began as a four-country framework, FTA, free trade agreement, involving Chile, New Zealand, Singapore, and Brunei. It began in 2006, and it has a very special features, including high-level FTA and comprehensive FTA. By high level, we mean the level of trade liberalization is very high. In principle, 100% tariff elimination immediately, although there are some exceptions, as I understand it. It is comprehensive, as it includes rules on intellectual property rights, government procurement, competition policy, environment, labor, and so on. What has been negotiated is enlarged TPP, involving not only the original four countries, but also, as you see there, Australia, Peru, US, Vietnam, and Malaysia. And it is expected to reach conclusion by the end of this year, although many people doubt about this possibility of reaching conclusion by the end of this year. TPP is considered to be one of three pathways to establish a free trade area of Asia Pacific, FTAP or EFTA. This was agreed by APEC leaders in Yokohama in 2010, and I think this was again reaffirmed by the leaders in Honolulu last year. In addition to TPP, ASEAN plus 3 includes China, Japan, Korea, CJK for short. FTA, it is called East Asia FTA, EAFTA. And the third pathway is ASEAN plus 6 FTA, called CEPA, CEPA. That includes ASEAN 10 countries, CJK, and India, Australia, and New Zealand. So this is TPP. So far, is that the 10 rounds have been finished? 12, I'm sorry. 12 rounds of negotiations have finished. So again, it is expected to reach conclusion by the end of this year. Now, Japan is not a member, negotiating member yet, but Prime Minister Noda, prior to, before Prime Minister Noda, it was Prime Minister Khan, who indicated strong interest in joining TPP in Yokohama in 2010. Then, last year, in Honolulu, Prime Minister Noda explicitly expressed a strong interest in joining TPP negotiations. However, because of a very strong position, mainly coming from agriculture sector, Prime Minister Noda so far hasn't been able to make decision on this issue. So it's still still in that process. In the meantime, Japan is conducting so-called preliminary talks with 9 negotiating members. And as far as I understand it, you have to get approval from 9 members in order for Japan to join TPP negotiations. And according to newspaper reports, it is US, Australia, and New Zealand that have not that haven't really approved of Japan's participation, and remaining 6 countries have, I guess, indicated that they welcome Japan's participation. I may be wrong, so Jeffrey can correct me later if I'm wrong, because my observation is based mainly on Japanese newspaper sources. Now, it is interesting to see reaction from other countries to Japan's indication of interest in TPP. For example, Canada and Mexico, immediately after, I think, Japan indicated its interest in joining TPP, these countries explicitly indicated their interest. And again, according to Japanese newspaper sources, their joining negotiations have been approved by all the 9 negotiating members. And so the interest in TPP has increased since Japan's expressing its interest in TPP negotiation. And it has very interesting impacts on China's behavior toward the FTA, region-wide FTA. And also, as I wrote it down here, CJK FTA. This is China-Japan-Korea FTA. China-Japan-Korea FTA, last week, I think it was last weekend, CJK Leaders Summit was held in Beijing, and they agreed to start CJK FTA negotiation within this year. And originally, well, the original schedule, when I say original, is this. Before leaders discussed CJK FTA or FTA negotiation, joint study group involving bureaucrats, academics, and private sector was conducted. And I was a member of that joint group, study group. And we were given a mandate that we were to submit final report by end of this year, 2012. However, China wanted to move the schedule forward, so they said a joint group has to submit the report by the end of last year, 2011. And that move from China came right after Japan showed interest in joining TPP. So TPP issue really made China more interested in formulating region-wide FTA in East Asia, excluding the United States. And also, talk of CJK FTA may put pressure on ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Countries, because there are frameworks called ASEAN plus 3, which I mentioned earlier, or ASEAN plus 6, which are still under study. There are 5 ASEAN plus 1 FTAs. Let's see, do I have yes. I should show you this. This is a very, I guess, good figure. I kind of took it from JETRO. But this is made by METI, as you see, a source is METI. What I was going to say is that there are 5 ASEAN plus 1 FTAs at the moment. They are all in action, in effect. ASEAN plus China was the first one, followed by ASEAN Korea, ASEAN Japan, and ASEAN India, and ASEAN Australia, New Zealand. And there are talks about ASEAN plus 3, ASEAN plus 6, and CJK right there. And when CJK FTA was gaining momentum, ASEAN was under pressure to take initiative in region-wide FTA. So they came up with this RCEP, it's called Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. We call it RCEP, which means it doesn't have to be either 3 or 6, it could be 5, possibly excluding India, because India's level of trade liberalization is quite low. So as long as ASEAN can take initiative and ASEAN can maintain its centrality, they like to have East Asia-wide FTA. So this is what is happening in East Asia. And of course, as I explained to you, TPP at the moment involving 9 countries, possibly 11 later, and possibly 12 if Japan is included. And final goal for Asia-Pacific region is EFTA. Okay, so that's sorry, maybe I took more time than I should have explained the current status of regional wide FTA developments. Now, what I wanted to argue is whether TPP could be a source of cooperation between the US and Japan, or it could be a source of conflicts between these 2 countries. And there maybe, I think, maybe both. That's my quick response to this question. The US and Japan can cooperate together under TPP to establish a transparent, stable, fair business environment by setting up rules, systems. And as we know, there are many firms or maybe state-owned enterprises which do not abide by the rules. And we don't like that. And so in order to deal with these problems, we can set up more fairer, more transparent rules that Japan and the US can do together. And in addition, although, let me turn to conflicts. Trade liberalization. If we interpret the rules of TPP literally 100% liberalization, Japan has difficulty in doing so. Agriculture is a big issue, and I'll come to that issue later. And services, some sectors, like financial sectors and so on, medical sectors, Japan like to protect. And so these are the potential problems. And I guess US has not as much as Japan, but they have their own problems too. So they can be a source of conflicts. But for me, if we can overcome conflicts, so they need to overcome conflicts, so if they are successful in doing so, they can promote WTO or trade liberalization. That's what the eventual goal should be. So TPP is a very good chance for both countries to overcome these opposition so that they can move forward in multilateral trade liberalization, which I didn't put in, but I thought that's a very important point. So Japan and US should cooperate to set up a better business environment and also to move forward in multilateral trade liberalization. Now, in discussing TPP and in Japan, I like to argue that Japan is in a very difficult position to achieve economic growth, and I just list some of these problems. We are growing very slowly, as you can see. Japan is shown by the line at the bottom. In China, as we know, growing very fast. US is growing faster than Japan and so on. And then Japan, one of the Japan's problem, this is again GDP, sorry. US on the top, Japan in red, and China overtook Japan in terms of absolute value of GDP. So this is the GDP performance. And then Japan economy is quite closed, and this is a trade to GDP ratio. Trade here includes exports and imports combined, and the US and Japan show similar trend, but generally large countries in terms of GDP, the US is like 3 times as large as Japan's GDP. They tend to have they tend to rely less on trade. So considering that observation, Japan's economy is very closed. So that's a problem. And then again, this is FDI GDP, foreign direct investment GDP ratio. Here again, Japan is the lowest. Another big problem in Japan is a demographic problem, declining and aging population. We hit the peak in 2007, I think. Then our population started to decline, kept declining. According to projections made by National Institute of Population, this is what we have. By 2050, our population becomes less than 100 million. And about 1/3 of the population is 65 years or older. This is the situation that we are faced with. Declining savings rate, growing government debt. Japan has, this is Italy. We talk about Italy, but now Japan's government debt to GDP ratio is significantly higher than other OECD countries. So if we consider all these difficult problems that we are faced with, we need to improve productivity. In order to achieve economic growth, we can do increase labor inputs, capital inputs, and increase productivity. We cannot expect much in the area of increasing labor inputs unless we accept immigrants. We cannot expect much in the area of capital inputs because our domestic savings rate is declining unless we are successful in attracting FDI, which we are not. Only method we can use to achieve economic growth is to increase productivity. How can we do it? And in my view, what we can do is to open up our economy so that greater competitive pressure comes in, and faced with increased competitive pressure, firms have to improve productivity or improve better use of their resources, and also domestic reform. Okay? These are two very important policies that we have to carry out in order to achieve economic growth and in order to enjoy a higher living standard. So if we are not successful in doing so, Japan's economic future is very pessimistic. Okay, so what are the possible choices, policy choices that we have in order to achieve an opening up for Japanese economy and to carry out domestic reform? I'd say FTA, TPP, because WTO at the moment is not really moving forward. So this is what we can expect from FTAs. FTAs in general, I have two kind of sets of benefits. One, FTAs in general, and then I turn to the benefits which we may be able to obtain from region-wide FTAs. FTAs in general, we may be able to achieve economic growth by expanding our exports to FTA member countries. We can improve investment environment for Japanese firms abroad, and we may be able to attract foreign direct investment. So these are what we could expect from FTAs in general. And then region-wide FTAs. TPP, this is what I said already, I'm repeating myself, but if we are able to set more transparent, better business environment using TPP, Japanese firms, they can benefit a lot from that improved business environment. And from East Asia's FTA that are set, construction and effective utilization of regional production network can be achieved by setting up region-wide FTA. And also, Asian markets are growing, although, and the problem is, many East Asian markets are still protected by high tariffs. So if we are successfully establishing a free trade area, then Japanese companies can expand their export to these growing markets. And also under the RCEP, infrastructure or region-wide infrastructure could be constructed, which would lead to economic growth of these countries, which in turn benefit Japanese economy. So I wanted to argue that Japan needs FTA, Japan needs TPP to achieve economic growth. However, it's very difficult now. A strong opposition comes from agriculture. They make the following arguments. We need to protect agriculture to achieve food security, stable and sufficient supply. I don't buy any of these, by the way, but these are what they say. Multifunctionality of agriculture. Agriculture gives you better environment. It maintains all the rural culture, regional economy, and so on. But in my view, the true story is these people want to protect their own interests. That's it. And I can only explain to you how it goes, but because of time, maybe we can do this later. But there are not just 2% of labor force which are engaged in agriculture. There are many other people who do enjoy gains, benefits from agriculture protection. And this graph shows you selected items which enjoy very high price in Japan. Konyaku is many of you may know what it is, and it enjoys 1,700% price rate. And many observers say the reason behind this is political. Maybe it is. It goes like this. One of the major areas which produce Konyaku is Gunma Prefecture. Gunma Prefecture produced 4 prime ministers in the last 30 years or so. Nakasone, Fukuda, Oguchi, 2 Fukudas, right? 2 Fukudas, and Oguchi. But that may be so. But the true story is that Konyaku grown in Japan requires a lot of labor-intensive care. Whereas cognac cream will grow in places like Myanmar. It's natural. They don't have to do anything. So that's the difference. But still, there are political reasons behind high protection of cognac cream. Rice, 780 or so percent. Rice is most difficult product, agriculture product, to liberalize because it is produced, grown in pretty much throughout Japan, and this is one of the, according to agriculture economists, this is one of the easiest agriculture product to produce. So part-time farmers, they enjoy producing rice, which is protected, so they can really benefit a lot. And in order for them to grow rice, they get assistance from agriculture cooperatives, Noda. That's how it goes. That's the source of the problem. Part-time farmers, they don't want to go out of agriculture. They like to maintain their land because they hope that the land price goes up and then they can sell and make a fortune. And that's the source of the problem in Japan. Okay, now quickly in concluding remarks. As I argued, TPP can be both a source of cooperation and conflicts between Japan and the US. And I tried to argue that they can take advantage of this opportunity to cooperate and to establish good business environment across Pacific, which may later be expanded to the rest of the world, since APEC accounts for a large portion of global economy. And also Japan and the US can cooperate to liberalize trade, which in turn could trigger global trade liberalization. And however, there's a strong opposition in Japan against TPP. Indeed, I've been involved with quite a few seminars, and the government has organized a seminar which is titled "Let's Discuss TPP Issues with People." And they invite a person like me who's pro TPP, and then there's a person against TPP. And these meetings, those who come are mostly anti-TPP. So when I make some statements, so much noise, nobody can hear what I say. But when the other person speaks, there's a lot of applause and you're right. And when I speak, they say, "Do you know what you're talking about?" That kind of thing. But still, very nasty, very really bad environment. However, Japanese politicians have to, if they realize the future of Japanese economy is going to be very pessimistic if we continue along the old line of policy, and we need to do something to achieve better medium to long-term future prospects. If politicians are convinced about that argument, they have to make a strong argument in favor of TPP and FTAs. And one, I think, very good argument for a pro-TPP person like me to persuade agricultural people is that if they depend on domestic demand is declining, their future is not so good, not so bright. They need to export. And where's the market? The market is in Asia because they are growing. They are becoming richer. Purchasing power is much, is going to be larger. So that's one argument that I've been making. And also the other one is that I talk about part-time farmers. Where do they work? They work in a company. And if we continue the present policy, companies are leaving Japan. So I tell them, you will lose job. Is this okay with you? So these are some of the arguments I've been making. Try to persuade anti-TPP agriculture people to become pro-TPP persons. So that's what politicians and maybe a person like myself have to do. Finally, I end my presentation with a question to Dr. Schott. As I told earlier, Japan is interested in joining TPP negotiations, and the US is one of 3 countries which have not given a go sign yet. Although I know that Japan has not formally asked for joining TPP because Prime Minister Noda so far hasn't been able to come up with decision. But what I'd like to know, and what many Japanese people like to know, is what are the conditions? What are the conditions that Japan has to satisfy in order for the U.S. to say that they can accept Japan for TPP negotiations? So this is my presentation. Sorry, it took much longer than I should have. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the U.S.-Japan Institute for inviting me to join you today. I think I better do it this way, otherwise we get an echo. It may not surprise you that my comments about Japan and the TPP are quite similar to Professor Urata's. We have been students of each other's work for a long time, and we had, I think, learned from each other. But I may have a few nuances that separate us, given the distance between our hometowns. I was torn on what to title my comments, my brief comments today, and I'll let you decide which of the 2 choices is the true title once I finish. The first choice was, can Japan participate in the TPP? And the second choice option is, can Japan afford not to participate in the TPP? And I tend to lean towards the latter, but let's look at some of the reasons why. But maybe I first owe Professor Urata an answer to his question. What does Japan need to do to satisfy the United States? Well, you can never satisfy USTR. Then they would have failed if you satisfy them, because then they would have thought they're not asking enough. But I'll give you a straight answer. Japan has to the Japanese leaders have to demonstrate that they have a sustained political commitment to reform at home that will enable them to be able to undertake and implement and sustain that implementation over time. And unless there is a clear demonstration of that political commitment and ability, it will be difficult because of the many concerns raised by the internal debate in Japan about the nature of reform and the pace of reform that have been going on for a long, long time, but have become much more urgent since the tragic events of March 2011. Now, like the United States, Japan has both economic and strategic reasons for engaging in trade relations and trade pacts with its neighbors and trading partners. And indeed, like the United States, the strategic objectives are very important. Indeed, may be the most important. But you it's hard to sell politicians on a foreign policy strategy unless there is some commercial gain, economic gain as well, particularly at a time of low growth and economic difficulties. But I think first and foremost, why Japan is interested in the TPP and why the United States is interested in Japan being in the TPP is to reinforce the U.S.-Japan strategic alliance, which has been especially important given the rise of China and because of provocations from North Korea and Iran, and the need to work together in dealing with those issues. Indeed, Japan has been working with the United States on Iran sanctions, and it has made significant contributions and sacrifices in support of that international initiative, and has cut back its purchases of crude oil from Iran. And of course, that comes at a time of shortages in supply of energy in Japan because of the aftermath of the earthquake and tsunami and nuclear disaster. The United States needs to work with Japan to ensure reliable and diversified supplies of energy are available to fuel renewed economic growth. So we have a broad strategic economic interest in working with Japan. And the TPP is one part of that strategic economic relationship. And indeed, the United States has granted a waiver from U.S. sanctions because of Japan's contribution to the reduction in purchases of Iran's crude oil in an attempt to divert Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities. Now, one aspect of this relationship, and this isn't the TPP, but it provides the broad strategic context in which the TPP discussions are taking place. One aspect is to encourage additional production from other Middle East producers, because with the reduction in supplies from Iran, Japan has to find alternative suppliers of crude oil. And the United States has been working with Saudi Arabia, as other countries have, to increase their production. Saudi Arabian crude is a heavy crude comparable to the Iranian exports that have been covered by the sanctions. And so that is one means of helping partners who are contributing, working with us on the sanctions. Second issue is a little more controversial in the short term, but important over the long term. And that is the prospect of U.S. Liquefied natural gas exports to Japan in the future. And the interest in expediting regulatory and environmental reviews so that infrastructure investment can go forward in the United States on an export-oriented distribution network. We have had investments in infrastructure for liquefied natural gas in the United States, but until very recently, it was all focused on importing LNG into the United States. And now with the bonanza of finds of reserves of natural gas in the United States that are now being produced, we have an exportable surplus. And we need the means to transport that, but we also need to safeguard the environmental considerations that are a fundamental part of our law. That's in part the strategic objective. Of course, there's a lot of military issues that go along with it, but let me, since we're talking about the trading relationship mostly, let me turn to those important issues. The second objective for Japan is what Professor Urata spent some time on, to boost the competitiveness of the Japanese economy, particularly in light of the broad-scale damage done by the earthquake and tsunami. There is a need to refocus attention on economic growth, how restructuring the energy infrastructure in Japan, dealing with the large debt burden, dealing with the need to generate more revenue, which is the subject of an intense debate in the Diet now about raising consumption tax. This is all important, and trade can contribute. A trade agreement can contribute in terms of the forces that Professor Urata talked about in boosting competition, spurring innovation in the Japanese economy, encouraging more foreign direct investment in Japan, and in many other ways boosting the productivity of the Japanese economy. The third issue is, third objective, falls under a broad category that my colleague Fred Bergston likes to call competitive liberalization. And Japan is suffering a lot from being outside of the major new trade initiatives that are going on. Just like the United States has been on the sideline. And while we were on the sideline, we fell far behind over the last few years. And so now that we have ratified and implemented the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement and the Colombia Free Trade Agreement this week, and Panama will be done this summer, and working on the TPP, Japan could be on the outside looking in and falling further and further behind if it doesn't engage more carefully, more closely with its trading partners. It needs to offset the discrimination that occurs because of the porous FTA. It needs to use the TPP to help catch up with Korean trade initiatives. And the Koreans not only have their deal with the United States, but they have a free trade agreement with the European Union that actually entered into force last July, which is discriminated against Japanese exports in Europe. So these are all important issues that we can go into more detail on them, but aspects of that Japan should consider in doing its calculus about the costs and benefits of TPP. There's another benefit. Japan already has trade agreements with almost every country that participates in the TPP or is seeking to participate in the TPP. The one exception is the United States. And so you might say, well, it doesn't make much difference. Japan already has trade agreements with those countries. But those either trade agreements or is negotiating. That's an important factor because it's negotiating with Australia. It's negotiating. It's planning to negotiate with New Zealand, but there are a lot of problems with the agreements, the economic partnership agreements that have been concluded in recent years. All of them are provide rather shallow economic integration compared to the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, or what is being developed in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so one of the benefits for Japan joining TPP, as it is for the United States, which already has agreements with some of those countries, is to upgrade the stock of relatively lower quality economic partnership agreements that are already in force and harmonize those with agreements with countries in the TPP, of which Japan does not yet have a trading arrangement. Now, that would be in and of itself a big economic boost for Japan. But when you look at what would be required to do that, you see talks with Australia are stalled. with New Zealand in the prenatal stage. Canada just announced. Korea had been suspended since December of 2004. Almost all of these negotiations or prospective negotiations, the prospects of all those talks are clouded by agriculture. And so for each one of those countries, would Japan change its agricultural regime for Australia? No. The United States didn't. And so there were sugar exemptions in the U.S.-Australia free trade. But if you have the prospect of a much larger market that will be harmonized and more integrated, then there is a better incentive to move forward with liberalization if you have the necessary conditions at home, which often means you have to provide adjustment programs that will manage the transition to more competitive environment in the domestic economy. Now that takes money, and the Japanese government doesn't have money. The U.S. government doesn't have money. And that's why the trade negotiations are linked so closely with the prospects for overall economic growth and new revenue generation. Now, final point, and this is the end of my allotted time. You might have thought that I would spend the whole time talking about rice and autos and issues like this. There are sticking points for Japan, and there is a question about what to do with agricultural reform, whether products would be subject to full liberalization, partial liberalization, over how long a period of time, and whether there would be possibly even products that are exempted from the liberalization schedule. There are precedents for that. As I noted, sugar was excluded from the Australia-US Free Trade Agreement. Rice was excluded from the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement. I suspect the Japanese officials regard the Korean precedent as a good one, and are calculating that that would be the basis in which they could move forward with other agricultural reform. And indeed, if they could move forward with reform on dairy and beef and other products that suffer from high protection, I think most of the countries in the TPP would probably welcome Japanese participation. There are other issues besides the market access issues in agriculture, but that's part of a normal trade negotiation. And the market access reforms are probably the easier part of joining the TPP for an advanced country like Japan. Now, there has been a lot of talk from U.S. auto companies about Japanese barriers. If you listen to them, it sounds much like what those companies said about Korea after the Korea deal was signed and before the supplemental agreement that covered auto trade was negotiated in December of 2010. It also sounds a lot like the talking points of those companies from the 1990s when they were concerned about a closed Japanese market, which was very closed, and which also benefited from an undervalued yen. Now, these companies argue that there is exchange rate manipulation by the Japanese government, but if they are doing that to support auto exports from Japan, they're doing a very poor job. Because with the yen at 80 to the dollar, it's not making life a lot easier for Toyota and others to export to North America. I guess the final point to make is on timing. There has been a great deal of anxiety about getting to the negotiating table quickly before the deal closes so that the Japanese can participate. And I think there are several things wrong with that picture. One is the talks are not going to close anytime soon, certainly not this year. There's nice rhetoric from trade negotiators because their leaders told them to expedite the talks and try to finish this year, but they can't. It's not going to happen. There's no way it can happen. So it is not something where Japan will find itself on the outside looking in. But talks are continuing. Progress is continuing to be made on the rulemaking provisions. And most of those rulemaking provisions will not yield very large barriers to Japanese participation. The real sensitive issues which will require reform in Japan and concessions to Japan's trading partners are in the market access area. Now, there are some important exceptions. The new law affecting Japan Post is one, where there will have to be some modifications. Otherwise, there will be a conflict between the TPP disciplines on state-owned enterprises and the new law on Japan Post. And my colleague Gary Huffbauer has a new Peterson Institute policy brief explaining that simply and in a few pages. But for the most part, I don't believe Japanese participation would slow down the pace of negotiations and prevent a endgame negotiation which actually will involve trade-offs on sensitive products and services. And indeed, one could argue that having a much bigger player in the market, much bigger rewards in terms of market access, might provide more flexibility for other TPP members to make concessions that they wouldn't otherwise make because Japan is going to be part of the bargain. So I guess I will close by saying the title of the talk should be, Can Japan Afford Not to Participate? And the answer is no. And can Japan participate? The answer is yes. And I suspect that we will see Japan at the table when the deal is signed in 2013 or slightly later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Open for questions. The simple rule is please identify yourself and your, what should I say, to whom you would like to ask a question or give a comment. Let's say. But one more thing. Let's ask a question.
From Professor Urata.
My name is Yoshiaki, and I have a question to Dr. Schott relating to U.S. industry demand on auto access. It appears to be that there is a great distance from the list approach which the USJI reportedly has recently taken, identifying the specific market access barriers, and the kind of a doctrinaire approach, as you pointed out, very reminiscent of the 1990s auto negotiation style. In other words, the argument that we'll believe what Japan will promise only if the cash register starts ringing. Which of the two approaches within the United States do you think will prevail in the end? Does that not sort of dichotomy present almost an insurmountable political obstacle for the administration to overcome and go forward and say, including Japan in TPP negotiations?
No. I think the administration showed in its negotiations with Korea that it will not accept a managed trade solution. And it didn't even though members of Congress and Ford and Chrysler asked it to do so. So this trade balancing requirement or looking at sales is not the barometer. It's creating the opportunities and eliminating discrimination. And so if you look at the deal that the United States and Korea signed at the end of 2010, dealing with emission standards and safety standards and the like, that was meant to provide some manageable transition to a non-discriminatory regulatory regime. And I think that's something that both governments can do.
Yes, Dave Fitzgerald, private consultant. A question perhaps for Professor Urata about whether dairy and beef, I guess, would be areas where you might be able to get more support in Japan for liberalization rather than what seems to be the rice and dominated type of opposition groups in Japan. Is there any likelihood that a move on that, since beef actually seems to be a much more prominent issue in American attention to trade problems with Japan in recent years, more than anything else?
Beef issues, as far as I understand it, USCM, that's one of the issues. No, it's not just trade liberalization. It's SPS type of issue. Is that correct?
But it's not really a trade negotiation agreement. It's a current problem in terms of access to the market.
No, but it's a question of political U.S. reading, whether there's a sustained political commitment on the part of Japan to reform. If something in the beef or dairy industry is forthcoming, that might be the kind of indication or signal the U.S. would need to.
Just a quick response to that. If once we get over the most recent flap on BSE, if the Japanese regulatory policy becomes more consistent with that of its neighbors, and it's much more restrictive now than its neighbors, that would make Senator Baucus happier.
Thank you. I'm Leah Solis, American University. I have a question about the timing of Japan's potential entry into the TPP, because I think it's important not only Japan joins, but when it joins, and will be a founding member of the TPP or not. Because, and to you, Jeff, I sometimes get the impression here in Washington that there is this sense that it will be easier if Japan joins after the deal is wrapped and it's put together, and then Japan is not going to delay anything, especially knowing the Japanese negotiation style that takes forever to actually hammer out a deal. And if that is the case, I mean, you don't want the scenario of having a larger export potential and so forth, but you want to present Japan with a done deal. How would that affect the chance of Japan actually doing this? Can the Japanese government overcome the resistance in Japan if it is to present an agreement you have no input in negotiating and saying this is good for the country, let's do it, even though we're not invited to the table to divide the deal?
Well,
US and
from
Japan
Japan's
side.
point of view, Japan wants to be a founding member. If they are just given a chance to accede, they may think twice if they like to apply for it. I think that's the kind of attitude that Japanese government people have. So unless Japan is a founding member, Japan may say, no, they're not interested. And knowing that without Japan, absence of Japan makes TPP less attractive to other countries. I mean, that's what I hear from Japanese politicians especially.
From what I said before, I don't think this is going to be a problem. I expect Japan will be at the table when the deal is finished. The question is, will it be at the table at the end of the summer, or will it be at the table in early 2013? And in terms of the actual operational status of the negotiations, I don't think it matters that much. A bigger question is, how does that timetable fit into the very convoluted twists and turns of Japanese politics? And that, I can assure you, I haven't the faintest idea. So that's a bigger challenge. Whether the timing of TPP member consideration of Japanese participation is consistent with the ups and downs of, or the window of opportunity to move forward in terms of Japanese politics. And I don't believe that Japan will be a foot dragger in the negotiations. Most of the rulemaking probably will be well advanced before Japan would enter, because we're already making a lot of progress, and talks will continue, and the next session will be in July. Countries, the TPP members, have agreed that they are not going to go back and reopen text that has been worked on. So there wouldn't be the opportunity for Japan to come in and say, well, everything you've done so far we disagree with, so we have to start over. That won't happen. That will be an understanding before, as one of the terms of entry. So I think it still can be done.
Can I just add one thing? Although I'm not a political scientist, as you are, it's very interesting to see what is happening in Japan in politics. If general election takes place, right now, of course, DPJ will lose, LDP wins, but they will not win majority. And Root, Hashimoto, is a mayor of Osaka, he's gaining support, but he's pro-TPP person. Okay, so if LDP wins, they are against TPP. There's a poll which was taking place about last year, I think before the end of last year. JA wanted to have a petition given to administration, and about 80% of LDP diet members signed, and for DPJ about 30%. So DPJ, if DPJ remains in the position, we still have a hope. But if LDP wins, there's a possibility of moving TPP forward or joining TPP discussion will be very slim. But this Hashimoto, if he wins, I mean, he has many supporters gaining support. I don't like some of his policies, but as far as TPP is concerned, he's pro-TPP. So that's one chance. Another chance is that if political reorganization takes place, reshuffling, as LDP breaks up, DPJ breaks up, and then maybe a group of people who are in favor of increasing consumption tax get together. They are mostly pro-TPP person. So that's another possibility. But, which means it's very hard to predict what will happen. But it is very interesting to see as an observer of the Japanese politics.
Mark, I just want to follow up on Jeff on the timing. What is the likelihood, Jeff, that at some point this summer or in September, the law jam will be broken with allowing Canada or Mexico to come in? So you really have started with new members to the Japan. How do you see that? I'm sorry,
Well,
Canada, Mexico.
Yeah. In terms of acceptance of new participants in the TPP, there are a lot of events going on that could accelerate movement to add new members in the near term. And on the other hand, there are a number of elements that could impose roadblocks to each of those countries. There are opportunities in the OECD meetings that are coming up, in the APEC Trade Ministers meeting, in the G20 meeting. So there are a series of sessions going on over the next month that provide opportunities for political leaders to get together and talk about the strategic interests of pursuing participation or pursuing the types of domestic actions that will then facilitate. On the other hand, you look at things going on in agriculture in Canada, in the United States with the Farm Bill, and there may be a break. I mean, the Canadian Trade Minister was in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago and brazenly said on television that Canada wanted to join and was willing to put everything on the table. And then, of course, the New Zealanders said, does that include dairy? And the Canadian Trade Minister said, absolutely not. He said, we made a commitment to farmers that we wouldn't change supply management in dairy. So Canadian policy is a bit schizophrenic. And actually, Mexico also suffers a bit because of its dairy program. So, but I think there's a strong interest in the United States in having Mexico and Canada both participate, because that's the best way to upgrade NAFTA without having to open up and renegotiate NAFTA. So
But the bottom line is your best guess as to when, let's say in September, or just take your time, I don't care for the time, that they will be a part of it, or at least we can start the process of balance all that.
I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd be broke by now. But I think there's a good chance that Japan, Canada, and Mexico will be participating in the talks by the beginning of next year.
Yeah, Mallory Starr, U.S. Asian Cultural Academy. I think I've heard quite a bit about the competitiveness of Japan. My question is, what do you think can be done to beat Japan's competitiveness?
To beef up the...
Yeah, beef it or enhance it.
Again, as I tried to explain in my presentation, of course, in order to improve competitiveness, you need, say, firms to come up with new technologies, or maybe universities and research institutes, they have to come up with new technologies, and that's one. And it's not just only technological improvement, but if you can use whatever you have, resources, labor and capital more efficiently, that will lead to improving competitiveness. And this is a very textbook answer to your question. But when we talk about competitiveness, recently we talked about Korean competitiveness vis-a-vis Japanese competitiveness. There, I guess, I'm not a business school person, but corporate kind of governance is a problem in Japan as far as I see it. In other words, it takes so long to make decisions compared to these successful Korean, like Samsung and Hyundai. So these corporate culture or corporate governance style, that has to be changed. And for that, again, external pressure, or maybe internal external pressure, that will do it. So what we need is to increase competitive pressure, and that's why I say we need TPP, FTA. So that I think with these, there's a chance that Japanese companies or Japanese economy becomes more competitive.
You mean from China, you stated. I have a question for Professor Urata. In Japan's agenda, does Japan can choose the CJK FTA or TPP, or Japan can go to the parallel at the same time?
In my view, I've been arguing that Japan should do both simultaneously, and Japan is one of maybe few countries that can do so, and should take advantage of that opportunity. CJK has already started, in a sense, because they agree, CJK leaders agree that they start negotiation before the end of this year. It's not clear that will be realized, but at least they made that statement. And Korea is a country which is not really keen on having discussions with Japan for good reasons, I would say. Japan can benefit a lot from CJKFTA because CK have high protection on some of the products which Japan is interested in exporting, high-tech products, for example. Whereas Japan has very low tariff rates on many products except maybe agriculture. And so CJKFTA does not do much good to China and Korea because they will not see reduction of Japanese tariffs except agriculture. I'm arguing that Japan has to liberalize agriculture even within CJKFTA. But if China and Korea like to exclude some of the high-tech products from trade liberalization, Japan would exclude agriculture products from trade liberalization. That's a worse type of CJKFTA, but that's very possible. But again, so Japan should do CJKFTA. Moreover, Japan should do what's called RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. That means ASEAN plus 1, ASEAN plus 3, ASEAN plus 5, ASEAN plus 6, whatever. So this is a region-wide FTA. And for that FTA, Japan can contribute a lot by providing economic assistance. And so what I'd like to see Japan taking a lead in RCEP, region-wide FTA in East Asia, providing kind of scenario for trade liberalization, providing assistance to promote economic development in East Asia, so that in the future they may be able to grow and to become a country which can accept rules and systems which are required for them to join TPP. And Trans-Pacific, Japan should join TPP so that Japan should open up its economy, and also Japan should contribute to setting up a better business environment in Asia Pacific. So that's what I wanted to see. But so far, Japan has been falling behind in both, unfortunately, both frameworks. CK started negotiations. They had first round of negotiations already. Japan is not in it. So Japan is not yet a part of CJKFTA negotiation. Japan is not a member of TPP negotiation. So Japan is a country which is lagging behind. That's what I didn't want to see, but that's what happened.
You first and then.
I'd like to address this to Urata Sensei. I'm Steve Winters, former foreign researcher at Kyoto University. Stand up. I think it's accepted widely that Japan is a cultural superpower. And this is very important in the Japanese influence around the world and in the reputation of Japan. Now, there's considerable opposition to TPP from the artistic community in Japan, who think that their ability to be creative is going to be decreased by the importation of U.S. IP regulations. It's not a joke, please. And you could find the references to the Japanese discussions in the English Wikipedia article on TPP for your reference. But there's also serious discussions in the U.S. of the same question. For instance, Congressman Mike Doyle just spoke on Wednesday over at Brookings on exactly this issue. He cited many examples where hip-hop artists in America have been arrested for making derivative works, mashups, and so forth and so on, which are an important part of American culture. And this is because of the faults, as he sees it, in our IP regulations. Now, the effect of TPP is going to take the faulty IP regulations in the U.S., which a lot of people in the U.S. don't agree with, and force them on the countries that join TPP. And in addition, it's going to force them on the people in the U.S., because once the U.S. is a member of TPP, we won't be able to change because we're a member of TPP. So, in your discussions of various opposition, in meeting with people who oppose TPP, have you heard any of these objections from the standpoint of intellectual property, open source, and the ability to produce derivative works and the disaster this is going to be for Japan?
Only one, I guess, point that I remember is a kind of, copyright issue. In U.S. Is practicing what 75 years after justice, no? Whereas Japan is 50 years.
It was changed to 75 to keep the copyright of Mickey Mouse by pressure from the Disney company.
Okay, so U.S. is interested in imposing the 75-year thing, where Japan like the 50. And so that's the point which I remember reading, so that the general people can enjoy more if 50-year rule is imposed. And that's how groups of, academics which are against TPP because of this policy of 75 years. But I don't know much about this other IP issues. Jeff, do you have any?
There are a lot of Mickey Mouse arguments being made in the public about this that distort and are caricatures of very important issues with regard to intellectual property. The basic point is you want the greatest dissemination of knowledge, and yet you have to safeguard the incentives to produce that knowledge. You know that. There are rules that have been set up in international agreements that are rather rigid. And they don't apply very well to the new age of electronic transmission. And that's the important area of debate in the TPP and of differences between countries with regard to how do you ensure the proper flow of commerce, electronic flow of data, how do you protect privacy concerns and in that distribution, how do you safeguard individual rights, how do you in an era when people are still thinking about property being this monopoly right that you have. So anyway, this would require a 3-hour lecture. It's a very important issue. It's one where the technology has basically left the negotiators in the dust, and they're trying to deal with some of the commercial implications. And it's something that shouldn't be left to the lawyers.
Louis Cohen, trade consultant here in town. I just wanted to ask Professor Urata, there have been meetings here in Washington as well as in Tokyo, either overt or quiet, between U.S. and Japanese negotiators, between U.S. and Japanese political leaders, at which this whole question of Japanese participation in TPP has come up. And the question of what it would take for Japan to demonstrate its firm intention to go forward in the way that Jeff described. These issues have come up and continue to come up, which suggests to me that in the U.S., at least at the level of the administration, not so much at the level of Congress perhaps, there is a significant desire to see Japan involved here. And just in an effort to answer your question to Jeff, if there are maybe two things that would improve the prospects for Japanese participation, I think one would be to raise the age of cattle going into Japan from 24 months to 30 months. And the other one would probably be to do something that was done in chorus for the auto industry, which is to provide a certain number of vehicles that could enter free of some of the difficult inspection requirements or standards requirements, knowing full well that Detroit is not really interested in exporting to Japan anyway, so whatever you give at that level would probably not be taken up. But it would be seen as an earnest of Japanese good faith. So those would be my two suggestions.
Thank you very much. Well, I wanted, I guess, after listening to Jeff about Japan has to show that it has committed itself to regulatory reform, and, sustain this policy reform. I mean, I understand that, but in concrete, policies, what does it require for Japanese government to show that it is determined, if it is determined, I guess, to continue or maintain or sustain this regulatory reform? Does it require, like Mr. Koizumi's breaking up, all vested interests? That's something I wanted to ask you. Thank you for these two ideas. But I have, again, not really doubts or direct response, but these specific measures you kindly offered are not the example that I guess Japan can show as evidence that Japan is determined to undergo the structural reform. These are too specific to just entertain U.S. interests. To me, these are not so constructive. I don't know if I'm...
My only suggestion in putting them forward was to change the political climate here a bit. I mean, clearly the negotiations are going to touch on a wide area of the Japanese regulatory environment. And that is something for the negotiations. But to overcome, the kinds of suspicions that exist here at a political level, some sort of gesture of good faith, I think would help. And those kinds of gestures would be noticed and could be defended as a suggestion that Japan is moving in the right direction.
Japan decided to increase this age thing. I read it someplace that Japan was going to.
It hasn't yet.
Thank you again.
My name is Kunio Kikuchi. I'm with Washington Research and Analysis. My question is to Professor Urata and all economists actually that talk about the necessity for growth of Japanese economy. One of the charts you didn't show was the chart of per capita income of Japan. And had you shown that along with China catching up with Japan and exceeding it, would show that Japan is heads and shoulders above all the other Asian countries and almost at the level of US at today's exchange rate and Europe, and 7 times more than China on a per capita basis. And you argued that TPP will make the living standards of Japan better if Japan were to join them. My question is, what do you mean by better? Because every time I go to Japan, it's a very nice place to be. The food is good, the transportation runs very well. It's much better than what's happening in China or Burma or Myanmar or any of these countries. So, and the population is declining. Do you really think that Japan needs to, quote, grow to live better? That's my question.
Thank you very much for very good observations, very interesting observations. Maybe kind of places that you go to Japan are very good. Whereas if you look at statistics, unemployment rate is rising, especially for young people, and so I'm not saying that you are only looking at Japan superficially, but there are a group of people who are suffering from the current recession. 20 years of no growth. That's what that's what it does to Japanese people, like unemployment rate. And when you talk to young people, they are not really interested in trying to
that's their choice.
Sorry?
That's their choice.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is that it is very difficult for young people to become ambitious because they are growing up in the period when no economic growth for the last 20, 30 years, and we college professors are telling them you have to be ambitious. You have to try to improve yourself, and they say. They're listening to us without knowing what we are trying to tell them. And one of the sad stories that I read is that when they took a poll, junior high school kids, what do you want to be in the future when you grow up? Many students responded by saying, I'd like to be a regular, full-time worker. There are so many part-time, temporary workers, and so just becoming a regular worker, having a full-time job, is their dream. That's what a low growth or zero growth does to people of Japan. And I don't want to see that happen. And for that, we need economic growth, I think. It's not, economic growth does not automatically lead to better situation for young people, I guess. It needs better education system and so on. But at least if they know what economic growth does to you, that's a necessary, in my view, that's a necessary condition. That may not be sufficient for young people to maybe enjoy their future. And that's how I see what economic growth does to people, especially young people. And that's why I'm saying that it's our responsibility to give them better chance, which may come from economic growth.
Okay, last one. You have a responsibility to ask.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Hirokawa with Just World Bank, and I have a quick question to Professor Urata. You pointed out that the TPP will deal with the unfair competitions by firms from developing countries. It is interesting, and I agree with that. But it's only if the TPP will become a very comprehensive framework, including the major developing countries like C or K or some other countries. So my question is, in which part or in which sector do you think that the Japanese firms are now suffering from the unfair competitions from developing countries, and how the current framework of the TPP will address it? Thank you very much.
I can think of many areas. IPR, intellectual property right protection, is one area which Japanese companies suffering a lot from many developing countries. And SOEs, we know that China have many SOEs which are supported by government, so they can maybe play games which by very different rules. They can make maybe losses, but they can survive, that kind of thing. So, but in my view, these firms, companies from developing countries, they may be playing very different rules now, but when they grow up, they will benefit from a better business environment. And that's and even for China, as they say maybe correctly, they are not ready to join TPP because TPP has such a high level. But when they grow up, there are many Chinese companies which will enjoy or benefit from a high level standard that the TPP may provide to them. So what I'm saying that currently there are many companies from developing countries which are not by, they don't play rules, play the games by the rules that developed countries like to see being abided by. But in the future, it will be developing countries companies which will benefit from having a good business environment, which may be established by frameworks such as TPP. So it's a gradual, I think, process that we have to really observe that is change, that is making this kind of TPP discussion very important. And when I talk to Chinese people, as I understand it, there are groups of Chinese, say scholars and politicians, they're not with one voice. I mean, it seems that all Chinese are against TPP, or many Japanese Chinese may think that TPP is a China kind of containment framework, but apparently that's not true. There are many Chinese researchers, especially maybe academics, who think that maybe China is not ready yet to join TPP, but eventually it should, and it will, because China will enjoy the kind of benefits that they can gain from being part of TPP. Sorry that my response to your question is very long, but we didn't talk about China, although I think China is a very important country when we discuss TPP, and I just wanted to throw in that element of the discussion.
Thank you very much. I think the panel
Take care. I love you.